If you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I'm right now a technical program manager at Microsoft, but I've also mentioned that my original position at Microsoft was actually supposed to be a software engineer. So in this video, I'm going to briefly talk about why and how I sort of switched from being a software engineer to a technical program manager and why I ultimately just didn't become a software engineer. So just as some quick background, I graduated from UCSD in June 2020 with an undergraduate degree in math and computer science, which is, just a fancy term for like a very more mathematically focused computer science program. But I also had a minor in entrepreneurship and innovation where we kind of studied industries and entrepreneurship and startups as a whole. I've talked about how I initially got into Microsoft and my experiences with all of the interviews, my experience prepping for the technical interviews, the behavioral interviews, all things like that. So I'm not really going to touch it in this video, but just to sort of hit the main point is that I interviewed as a software engineer, not a program manager. So my interview was a software engineering interview, so it had all of those typical characteristics of a software engineering interview, such as, the technical whiteboarding or coding question, the behavioral style sort of technical questions, probing technical knowledge, stuff like that. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh, this guy must have interviewed for a software engineer, didn't get the job, and then applied to be a program manager. That's not true. My original offer to work at Microsoft was actually to be a software engineer. That's literally what my offer said. It said like, hey, congrats, we're gonna give you an offer to become a software engineer. And on the paperwork, it said like, you're coming in as a software engineer 1 or whatever. And I accepted that offer, signed it, submitted it, and for a majority of my senior year in college, I believed I was going to be a software engineer at Microsoft. Because basically I interviewed at Microsoft, I think in October of my senior year, in 2019 is when I interviewed, and then I ended up getting the offer at the end of October because I interviewed, I think, in the beginning, but I was also studying abroad at that time, which I've mentioned in previous videos. But basically for I want to say 6 or so months, basically almost 2 months before I was supposed to start at Microsoft, my offer was still to just be a software engineer. Now, obviously, I was super happy to have a software engineering offer out of college at such an awesome and large tech company. But I was also one of those people, at least my experience in college led me to this, where I did like coding. I really like coding and I still love coding, but it's not the only thing I like to do, especially at work. I like to participate in a lot of different things. So when I was applying to full-time positions, I really was also looking into those sort of other fields where I could apply my computer science degree. So that's the technical program management space. So I was really interested in how I could apply my technical knowledge to coding, but also to more macro level perspective stuff. So I was looking into program management positions as well, but at this time I thought I was just gonna be a software engineer. So either way, I was just really happy to have this offer, especially straight out of college. One of the main reasons that I wanted to be a more program manager focused, but still do dev work was I liked coding, like I just mentioned, but I wanted to have influence on the actual product as a whole. And depending on the company, sometimes software engineers aren't given that opportunity. If you're at a startup, you'll likely be able to wear multiple hats. So you'll likely be able to, both write the code, do the testing, do the user interface, but also do the presentations, do the planning, do the roadmaps, do the architecture, maybe do cost analysis, all things like that, because you're sort of restricted in the amount of headcount you can have. But at large tech companies, the job distinction is a lot more present. Obviously, it'll depend on your team, but software engineers will generally just write software. They're not going to be doing presentations. Generally, they're not going to be, they'll write documentation for the code that they write, but generally they're not going to be creating roadmaps. They're not going to have that sort of macro level perspective. They're going to be focused on the engineering work. So I kind of wanted to do both, which is kind of hard to do at a large tech company, because I wanted to see where the product is going. I want to, suggest features. plan for it, but then also like dig deep into the code and actually do it. So cut to like 2 or 3 months before I'm supposed to start, and I think I got an email from a recruiter that gave my contact to my now former manager. He reached out to me and was basically like, hey, I read your interview packet and I think you would be a great fit for my team, where you will sort of be a dev, like software engineer, program manager hybrid. So after some more emails and talking on the phone, he basically described how I would sort of be like a dev PM hybrid for like this new team, because the team he was in charge of was, really fairly new. So that would sort of involve actually writing code, which I really wanted to still do. Obviously, I got a degree in computer science. I'd like to use it a little bit besides, like making meme videos on YouTube. But I would also be doing PM work, so presentations, architectural planning, user story creation, backlog grooming, feature planning, and occasionally probably customer interactions, where customer is like more, internal teams rather than like external facing customers. So he basically gave me the option. He said, hey, I know you're coming in as a software engineer and you can stay that way, but I think you do really well in this sort of dev hybrid PM role that I'm creating on my team. So if you choose to accept it, then we'll transition your offer to instead be a program manager title rather than a software engineer title. Now, it was still the same compensation, still literally everything in the offer. The new offer was exactly the same. The only difference was instead of the position being software engineer, it just said program manager. And after some sort of thinking, it kind of seemed like almost a perfect opportunity for what I was looking for. Now, like I mentioned, I loved coding, but I also wanted that more macro level perspective. And from my conversations, it sort of sounded like this is the position that I really wanted. I wanted to be both a PM and write code and be a software engineer. So I ended up just accepting that offer, and then that kind of led me to where I am now, where I'm like a categorically technical program manager. It's funny because several times I've had to like explain my code to either someone new joining a team, like maybe a new dev, or someone from an external team, and they'll actually like stop me and be like, I thought you were a PM, like you seem very technical. And I'm like, listen, I always use the dumb joke where it's like, listen, I try to put the technical in technical program manager. It's sort of cringe, but I generally try to do that. So I think having that technical background, having that undergraduate degree in computer science and math, having past software engineering internships, as well as doing a lot of dev work makes me a better technical program manager, because I can relate to the devs, because I've done a ton of dev work. On my last product at Microsoft, I was coding 80% of the time, most of the time. Now it's a little bit different. I code a little bit less. I'll get into that in probably a future video. But yeah, I think having that technical knowledge, that technical background makes me just ultimately a better technical program manager, because as I said, I can relate to the devs, but I can also take those technical requirements, take those roadmaps from non-technical PMs, so PMs that basically have to interact with customers, see what they want, but they don't necessarily have that technical knowledge. So I can, kind of fit in between that intermediary where I can help the devs write the code, but I can also help the PMs create that technical roadmap so that they're not just giving engineers just like really vague customer requirements or functionality that they might want. So that's kind of where the TPM role sort of emerges. So this ultimately was just a really great option for me because, again, I like coding, but I wanted to participate in those higher level conversations, but also keep up in technical conversations. So I know some people really like coding and they just want to code all day, every day. That's all they want to do. And that's perfectly great. That's awesome. But I wanted to, get a little bit more, diversity in the work I would be doing. And I think, again, that kind of goes back to what type of company you're working at. So if you're a software engineer at a tech startup, you'll likely be doing a ton of different stuff. And some people really like that, and some people hate that because they're a software engineer. They don't want to be doing PM work, or maybe PMs don't want to be doing dev work. I kind of wanted both. I kind of like doing both. So this was just a really good option. And it's honestly really common for software engineers to want to become PM. So they get their kind of, coding bug out. Like they like coding a lot, and eventually they just kind of, they either move along and they're like, okay, I want to try something else. So I've seen a lot of software engineers that are looking to become program managers, less so program managers wanting to become software engineers, because generally that requires more of a specified knowledge, like a degree. So that's basically how and why I didn't become a software engineer at Microsoft. I also recently just switched teams, still same general area, just I'm working on a different product. And that's why previously I said that my former manager reached out to me to become sort of a technical program manager, and my responsibilities have sort of changed. So I'm coding a little bit less. I still do code, and I'm doing more like team collaboration, and I'm really driving. I feel like I have a lot more responsibility, sort of, because I'm really driving a certain effort for this given product, whereas before I was doing just a lot of dev work on my old product, because basically we only had one software engineer working on it, so I basically had to fill in the role to actually get the dev work on track, whereas this one I'm like really driving it. So I'm doing a lot of the dev work, I'm doing a lot of the planning, I'm doing a lot of the team collaboration, the architecture planning, the presentations, like I'm doing a lot of it. So I feel like for my role, I have a lot more responsibility than I previously had, which I actually do really like. It's a bit of a change of pace, which I like. It keeps things spicy. So I'm thinking of making another video about that and how, internal changes in a company can sort of affect your work, the pros and cons of that. So if that sounds interesting to you, comment that down below. Also comment down below why you do or sort of don't want to be a software engineer, because there are some people who really want to become a software engineer, and there are a lot of people who are sort of hesitant on doing that. So I'm genuinely interested. So comment that down below. Also helps the YouTube algorithm. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you found it semi-useful and giving sort of a different perspective compared to a lot of the other software engineering YouTubers out there. My name is Michael. We do bad British accents at the end of every video, or Aussie, depending on how you hear it. Check out one of my past videos, and my past self would thank you dearly, and check out one of my future videos, and my future self would also thank you dearly. That's all from me. Hopefully I see you in another one. Consider subscribing to the channel. We make college advice, tech, computer science, career advice videos. So consider subscribing for that. Like this video to help your boy out with the YouTube algorithm. That's all from me. See you in another one. Bye-bye.